Welcome to Fusion 5 Radio with your host, Fusion 5 CEO, Rainee Busby.
Yep. And thank you, because it's produced by Rainee Busby. Okay. Anyway, it's true. But we're going to go into some really neat stuff now. But I do want to remind you to write to us. As you know, and if you've been listening for the last few weeks, Rainee is an expert when it comes down to business and creating business and how to start a business and how to make a business run a whole lot smoother. And when we talked about doing this show, we were originally on in Austin, and it was a secular business show. And but Rainee started teaching, and I realized that there was a lot of issues here that really relate so strongly to the Word of God. And Rainee and I talked a great deal about this, how we want to help pastors as well. And the best thing to do that is reach out into the Christian community. Thus, we're on the Wilkins Network. Mm-hmm. But right now, I want to turn it over to Rainee so she can share with you about the core values. Now, this is dealing with business, but please also remember, it's also dealing with ministry and pastors. So if you have a pastor, I want to encourage you, and you should have a pastor anyway, I want to encourage you for him to encourage him to listen. You could also find these lessons on YouTube, which you can find directly off of fusion5radio.com.
Yes.
And share it with him. And also look us up on Facebook. You'll find Fusion 5 Radio on Facebook. You also find Thoughts with Mark Dildine on Facebook. But share this. This is very important information that could change people's lives. Isn't that true?
That's
and
very
right
true.
now, here's my dear friend, Rainee Busby.
Oh, that was just such a sad intro after last week. We had all the hoopla. I think there was drum rolls and everything. I'm feeling really left out here.
I know. Okay, all right. Here's the drum roll. Okay. Rainee Busby. Okay, there you go.
Oh, I'm feeling
I know,
Okay.
but you know, I get kind of Hallmarkish.
You too.
Yeah, go for it.
Alrighty. So let's talk about core values. And when core values, when we establish them, it's really the foundation for how we operate. It's our culture, right? So it's how we behave, the attitudes that we have, the language that we use. Many times we have our own languages. And it's how we focus. But it's collective as a group. It's not as an individual. So I'll be talking about, I mentioned earlier, the importance of bringing people into your company or your organization that align to those values. And you hear more and more people saying, oh, we hire to our culture. That is so important, because each person that comes in, if they don't fit your culture, they chip away at your culture. And before you know it, your culture just is just a saying on your website or maybe a sign on the wall, and that's a pretty bad place to be. So let's talk about some of the characteristics of your culture, right? So I mentioned the foundation. It can also be a source of morale. People get really proud about their company or proud about their organization because these are the values that we stand by. So that's critical. It also can be a source of pride for the community that the company would reside in, right? People are proud to have certain businesses in their community. It helps us to bring together people that, we have certain expectations of as far as, what's the ideal behavior? What's the ideal behavior of our leadership teams? We have very, very broad base of different leadership styles. So leadership style is a very important part of that. It also helps with how we make decisions, right? So we use our values to bounce off. Does that decision apply and enforce the values that we have? Because we want to make sure, because if not, it makes it easier for us to make the decision because it's very clear it doesn't align to our values and that's not the direction we're going to go in. So as I mentioned, employees are very clear in how they work with one another, right? How they treat each other. So we're not going to have a lot of loud, I wouldn't say abusive, but disrespectful language or treating people in a disrespectful way because they may think differently than you. When we talked about the employees and it helps us to not only attract the right type of employees or hire them, but also to keep employees in our organization, which is another reason why we want to make sure that we keep the values very top and center and that they're enforced, right? Because your best people they take the jobs that have the culture that they align to or the values that they align to. It's not about money, it's not about benefits. It's really about, do they believe in what I believe? And so that's the company they're typically going to work with or want to go work for. So another thing on customers I want to mention a little bit about is that your brand can be differentiated in your marketplace based on your values. And I'll give you some examples of some companies, and I recommend you go out and check them out. So some companies like Southwest Airlines. If you have not gone and checked out Southwest Airlines and their values, they are powerful and they live by them. It's harder to get accepted into a high-end college or university than I'm sorry, let me say that again. It's harder to get a job at Southwest Airlines than to be accepted into a very large university. So they have, for like every 5,000 jobs, they'll have like 100,000 applicants. So that tells you that their brand differentiates them, and that's the place where people want to work. And that's also the place where customers want to be serviced, right? Because they love the company as well. So I'll give you a list of a couple other companies I recommend you go out, you check them out and see if you might want to maybe borrow or consider some of these values when you start to define what your values are. Zappos, fun company. If you ever look at their website, they got some videos. I mean, it's just wild and crazy, but they empower their people. And so they have some very strong values that they live by. The Container Store is another one. Whole Foods. How about Amazon or Google? Also a couple other ones. So a great examples of companies that are living by their core values and making a difference in the world. And they have some wonderful employees that just love working there. So how do we go about defining what our core values are, right? We need to get some clarity. So what I typically recommend is that you don't go borrow somebody else's, and you don't want to go in there just with a perceived notion. It's like, oh, I already know what our core values are. This is what they've been, it's like and you put some nice, trust, integrity, going the extra mile. That's not really what we're talking about. We're talking about the opportunity to take a step back, really clear your mind. Start with your leadership team. Ask your employees, what are the behaviors that you bring to work every day with you, regardless of whether you're recognized or compensated for them? What are those behaviors that makes a difference? So I tell clients, start with your engaged or highly experienced employees and watch them. Watch how they interact with customers. Watch how they go that extra mile. How can you come up with some fun ways to really start to define some of those different values, and make a big giant list, and then start putting them together in how they kind of group. So they may have themes about them, and it'll help you to kind of get some sanity around it, because you might end up with like 50, 75 core values when you start asking your people to help out with them. And so, I think the last thing I'll talk about is implementing them, right? So once we get them defined, we got to make sure everybody knows what they are. So clearly have them taught, educated to your entire workforce, articulate the values, making sure people understand the definition of those values. So if you need to take it a little extra step and define them, please do that, because employees need to know what that value from a behavior perspective looks like. So I recommend that you highlight when you see that value being represented within your workforce. Put it in your newsletter, write a little story about it. Let people know this is an example of our values in action, and share it with everyone that you can, including people outside of your organization. Don't forget about your people in your community. Don't forget about your customers, right? Also include it in your performance reviews for your employees. You're going to enforce and support your core values, and this is a good way to say, we're not kidding, we're really serious about that. One thing that typically what we see is, if you have employees that are in your organization now, you've taken a step back, you've really defined what those core values are and what you stand for as an organization, then I recommend, and I work with clients to do this, is that you sit down and you walk through every single employee with your leadership team, and you check them on every one of those values. Do they align to your values? Some you may say, yeah, maybe not exactly, but they could. And for some people, you're going to say, no, they absolutely don't. They may be really great at their job. They may have a lot of experience, but they don't align to our values. And those are the people that you need to let go. They need to go find a company that does have values that align to them. So, the final thing is just make sure you promote it. Promote it on your website, which is usually what people do. And that kind of wraps up our core values. So let's go ahead and take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back on Fusion 5 Radio.
Hello, friends. If you're enjoying our program, Fusion 5 Radio with Rainee Busby, let us know by going to fusion5radio.com and emailing us. Rainee wants to encourage you to write to her with any questions or comments that you may have. That web address again is fusion5radio.com. fusion5radio.com. Rainee wants to help you be more productive in business and ministry by sharing with you each week how to get your life back through simple, practical steps. fusion5radio.com. Write to us.